And thank you for staying with us. We're turning now to the world of politics. Senator Elizabeth Warren, as well as the infestation, I should say, the Claremont Consolidated Houses and the killing of Saudi journalists. We're talking about that and more. We welcome now Michael Benjamin, who's associate editor of the editorial page of the New York Post. And Mike, good to have you. Mike, are you there? Okay, I think we have some technical difficulties. Is he there? Okay, we're standing by, trying to bring Mike on, and as soon as we get him, I think we got him. Mike, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hey, how you doing, Mike? I'm sorry, I had a little
I'm well, thank you.
hello technical difficulties. We are back in the saddle with you. I want to go back and let's start off with a story that I led with a little earlier, the infestation at the Claremont houses, and the fact that we're talking about rats in NYCHA buildings again, and a lot of things continue to plague NYCHA, and it seems as though that when we're looking, it's issue after issue. Where do we see this NYCHA thing going?
No, I personally believe that the whole management agency ought to be abolished, and something new ought to be put in its place, because they're showing they cannot manage NYCHA, whether it's the large development or the smaller houses that were put in their portfolio about 10, 15, 20 years ago, like the Claremont Consolidated, which are basically smaller tenement buildings that landlords had abandoned. The city took over, had NYCHA fix it up at the time, and then to put it in NYCHA's portfolio to manage. I mean, to the point where you have rats invading residents' apartments. That's just horrible. At one time, NYCHA public housing was considered a step up from those kinds of environments for many families.
And you talk about actually abolishing NYCHA. I mean, given the fact that we've had, the governor, the borough president, countless officials really hitting at NYCHA's doorstep, what do we see happening in the near future? Because this, of course, is, a microcosm of a macrocosm.
No, yeah, there are major problems, whether it's the elevators. Now it's heating season, so will the boilers be able to heat the apartments and provide hot water to tenants in the large developments? That's the problem. As you know, currently there's a federal judge looking at the possibility of appointing a federal monitor to have say-so over the repairs that are going to be made at NYCHA. And the judge himself is so frustrated with the city and with NYCHA that it's possible he could scotch the whole thing and suggest that the whole thing go into receivership. Last week the city's lawyers argued that tenants in NYCHA took a risk when they signed a lease to go into public housing. That's absurd.
Absolutely absurd. Let me move on, take the shuttle, go on down to Washington, D.C., talk about President Trump now. And latest, his latest is now the saga is with Senator Elizabeth Warren out of Massachusetts. Given the fact that the president is going back and forth, Liz Warren, we've had the Kavanaugh hearings, how do we see this playing out possibly in the midterm elections? Is any of this going to have any effect?
I don't think the Senator Warren issue has any effect on the midterms. There's a saying about let sleeping dogs lie. Mm-hmm. Senator Warren made a major mistake in looking to address her so-called Native American heritage. All she did was unleash a hornet's nest of criticism by Native Americans, criticizing her for her claim to be Native American, and then criticizing the whole DNA testing that allegedly helps people determine, what their ethnic backgrounds are. And as you know, Native Americans are not determined by their DNA. It's by, having been born there, raised as a Native American, living on a reservation, et cetera. Under current law, Native American law and U.S. law is what determines a person's, Indianhood. So this will not have an effect on the midterms, but the president's keeping it up. Then you have him tweeting about Stormy Daniels, and you have him making excuses for the Saudis who murdered a Washington Post journalist and contributor. The president is going on the campaign trail trying to gin up support by insulting Democrats. That's the sort of thing that can have an effect on the midterms. And you've seen reports in the Times, the Wall Street Journal, other papers talking about Republican women who are so angry at the president that they could be the folks who tipped the Congress in favor of a Democrat in next month's election.
When you talk about Democrats actually possibly regaining the House, how do you see that? Is it a good shot?
Like 20 seats to 25 seats they have to flip. It remains a possibility. We'll see. But the real thing the Democrats really need to do is to take control of the U.S. Senate. So the Senate's the ones who confirm, Supreme Court nominees. So they confirm people in the cabinet. They confirm federal judges. And if there were an impeachment, it's the Senate that would determine, which would try the president. So I think for the Democrats, the real crown jewel is taking control of the Senate, and that looks like a possibility. But right now, it all seems too close to call. It's going to come down, to the last 2 weeks or so before voters begin to make up their minds, and then turning out at the polls. And you've had a hurricane that struck the panhandle of Florida, and that could affect voting in that part of Florida, and other things could happen that could affect turnout all across the country.
Yeah, and people are still paying very close attention to that because those races, in many ways, are somewhat too close to call, and we've kind of like looked to the last minute to get that, to get the finality of those results. Mike, that's all.
And we don't know what the president's going to say or do. Things that could, tick off or energize, voters.
Yeah, that's a major point right there. Mike, I got to leave it there. Thank you for joining us, Mike Benjamin from the New York Post. We want to thank you so much for joining us, Mike, as always.
Thank you.
Sharing with us. And we've got more open. We want you to stay with us. We got more show coming up right after this.